Hi, my name's Sean Lavin. I'm the 4th and 5th grade mathematics coach for the district. 4th and 5th grade students will begin to work with fractions in the next few weeks. Don't panic. It'll be okay. I know just hearing the word fractions can cause some anxiety, but don't let it. First, your child's teacher will review all the fundamentals that I'm about to present in class. If they notice that their class needs some extra help before starting the first fraction topic, they will review some of these areas before starting the topic. The second reason you shouldn't panic is that I'll be providing videos summarizing each lesson in every topic. Think of it as a 2-minute tutoring session for every lesson that you can refer back to if your child is struggling and you want to know exactly what they learned. With that, let's get started. So, first grade, all they did was something called equal shares. They would show the kids a shape and they would ask, is it equal? They would start to use certain terms, so certain math vocabulary like halves and fourths. They would also use the term quarters. That's it. That's all it is. As they present them with a shape and it's already partitioned, and they ask whether it's fair or not. So, for example, this is fair, this is fair, this is not, this is not, this is fair, this is fair. Okay, so they just get the kids to get the idea that in order to make fractions, they're starting to build that understanding that you have to have four, if we're talking about fourths, 4 equal groups. If we're talking about halves, we have to have 2 equal groups. All right. So that is basically just grade 1. Believe it or not, that's it. Grade 2 is not a whole lot more. They go back to the idea of equal shares. Again, they talk about halves, whether something was an equal share or not. They talk about fourths, and again, whether something was an equal share or not. But they also introduce another vocabulary term of thirds. Okay, so they're building just a little bit more. The other difference is, instead of just already having things, shapes partitioned, they will give students in 2nd grade a blank shape and they will ask them to partition them into halves, thirds, and fourths. And some of them, like fourths and thirds, they will ask them to partition them in a few different ways. Okay. So what I would ask, first thing I would do is, and this first thing I actually did with my 5th grade students, was I would give them a rectangle and I would ask them to make partition that rectangle into fourths or thirds or halves. And for my 5th graders, I would actually then ask them to do fifths and sixths. I probably want to go beyond that right then. Maybe I'll ask for like 12ths. After I've already asked for 6th, I might ask for 12ths. But I just want to see whether my students have the idea of what partitioning means, whether they have the idea that it still has to be equal shares. Okay, so that's 2nd grade. 3rd grade is where we start to really get into fractions, where like the real good information is going to start to be delivered. All right, so this is where they're actually going to hear the word fraction for the first time in math class. So, for example, each of these wholes are being broken into 4 equal parts. 4 equal parts. This does not have 4 equal parts, so each part is not 1/4 of the whole. So for these, they would be. So again, all of them, each of these would have 4 equal parts. So there are 4 parts. Each of these equal size groups are going to be 1 out of the 4 equal parts. And that is called a unit fraction. And this is a term that they are going to hear from 3rd grade all the way through 5th grade and probably beyond. the idea of a unit fraction is something they really have to understand, that it is the building block of fractions. Okay, so getting a little bit deeper into that, beyond just the idea of a fraction is a part of a whole, and a unit fraction is one of the equal parts that the whole was broken into, we then start moving into something else. We start moving into understanding how that it's not that everything isn't represented as just a unit fraction, that it's not just everything isn't just 1 over 4 or 1 over 2 or 1 over 6. We are going to ask about different fractions. So for example, in this example, we know that this pan is broken into 6 equal size parts. So we start to get an idea of what the denominator is. So the terminology starts to be developed about the denominator, that the denominator represents the total number of equal parts that the whole has been broken into. Okay, and the numerator is going to represent the number of copies of the unit fraction that we're referring to. So in this case, let's say how many, they were talking about the pan of cake here. What fraction of the cake was served? We would say, okay, here is 1/6, 1/6. So I know that each of these are unit fractions. So I have 1/6 part, 1/6, 1/6, because again, my fraction is always built on unit fractions. So the ones I'm referring to is the amount that was served. So that's going to be represented here by a total of 2/6. Okay, and if someone were to ask how much of the pan is left, I would say, okay, you're referring to the amount of unit fractions that have not been touched yet. So we have 4/6. Okay, so that's what the numerator is referring to. Again, it's the total number of copies of the unit fraction that we are referring to. So for example, here's another illustration. So in this illustration, what fraction of the whole are yellow? So you would take a look at the total number of parts. How many is that? Right, that's 8. And how many are yellow? So we have 1/8, 2/8. So 2/8 are yellow. Again, I am building using that unit fraction to build. So I have 1/8 and another 1/8 to make 2/8. So I would then ask a follow-up question: how many eighths are blue? So that would be 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8. Again, it is the total number of copies of blue shaded areas are 6/8, 6 1/8 size pieces. All right, so this idea of unit fractions, they start to build on what a numerator and denominator is. It's a really good foundation for where we're going with fractions. All right. So we then move into we start to move a little bit away from the idea of pictures representing things, and we start to get into the idea of number lines and using number lines to help us. So we would ask students to be able to not only partition shapes, your 4th or 5th grader needs to have the ability to have a blank number line that is from 0 to 1, and we'll talk about going beyond that later, but from 0 to 1, and be able to make a number line for fourths. So this would be 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, And yes, I'm going to also put my fraction here, 4/4. Again, this is broken into 4 equal size groups. Here's one whole group. Here's the second. Here's the third. And here's the fourth. So 4 equal size groups. Just like we did with the shape, we're doing that with the number line. Big skill that the kids need to be able to do. It's super important that they are able to break up a number line. All right. So as I was saying before, a student has to also be able to break up and create a number line that goes beyond just the number 1. And again, we're still working with fourths, so this will represent exactly what we did up here. Here's my 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. I can move beyond that into 5/4, 6/4, 7/4, and then 8/4 would be 2. We can then start to have a little bit of a discussion. We're not going to probably talk about it for very long in 3rd grade. And as a matter of fact, I doubt we'll. It's just a mention is how you make a mixed number. So, for example, 7/4 would be 1 whole because it's made up of unit fractions. So there's 4/4 here, and then we have 1/4, 2/4, 3 more fourths beyond there. So 1 3/4. Okay. And in 4th grade and 5th grade, when we start dealing with subtraction of fractions, students are going to need to be able to see this, that, oh, this is broken into fourths. Without any of this, they're going to know that this 1 whole represents 4/4 and 3/4 for a total of 7/4. So if they had to subtract fractions, like let's say they had to subtract 2/4, they could actually do that. Now this is way down the road, but I'm just telling you that you're going to see this at some point in 4th and 5th grade where they have to rename a mixed number and they have to create that improper fraction, or it's also been called a fraction greater than 1. Okay, so that's going to be something they're going to need to know how to do. All right. They then get into the idea of just measurement, and they're going to work with the students to measure items into 1/4 inches. Okay, so again, this is just building upon that idea of the number line, and yeah, a tape measure is basically just a number line. And that this would represent 2 wholes, 10/4 total, so that would be 2 wholes, and then 2/4 more. Okay, all right. So that is the first part of grade 3. The second part of grade 3, I'm going to pause for a second because that's the essential foundation for fractions in grade 3. Then they move into another unit in grade 3 that gets a little deeper, and this is where the absolute essentials come from. All right, we'll pick up on that in the next part of the video.